Hi students, this is a brief video in which I'm going to give you additional information about the privilege reaction paper that is due at 12 noon on September 6, 2016. As I've noted at the top here in red, basically, the paper is approximately 5 to 8 pages, and I emphasize the word approximately. It should not be shorter than 5 pages. If it is, you'll probably not get very much credit for it, but it can be longer than 8 pages if you feel that you need additional pages to give me the information that is required in the paper. This is just an approximate maximum length, and if you go over, I do not count off. The first thing that you're actually going to do is you're going to provide an introduction, and you should go to the APA mini guide, which is a downloadable PDF document under the APA information on the left side of your Blackboard screen for this class. You should read that information in detail, and on page 7 you will find the expectations for an introduction and a conclusion and the way that I expect them. You'll note at the bottom of this page that if you don't write them in the way that I expect them, you will not get 5 points, and these will be points that will be taken off from your total grade. Moreover, if your conclusion does not adequately state what I expect it to, which is what the paper is addressed, you will also lose another 5 points. So be mindful of that. Please read the APA guide that I have posted and be familiar with my expectations for introductions and conclusions. So having said that, the first thing that you're going to do for this paper is you're going to provide a very brief summary of the readings assigned for this paper that you're responding to. And in this particular paper, you have to refer to all 4 of the readings that were assigned on privilege for this week. And you're going to provide basically a 2 to 3 sentence summary of all of the readings, of each of the readings. And then you're going to provide probably about a 2 to 3 sentence summary of kind of the umbrella perspective. What did they have in common? What did you take away from them? Next thing you're going to do for the next section is you're going to identify the ways that you have privilege or are oppressed in these following areas: race, gender, gender expression and identity, religion, spirituality, nationality, health, which includes physical and mental health, both seen and unseen health issues, and socioeconomic class. Your readings refer to a variety of these, and it's important that you be aware of the areas in which you have both privilege and or are oppressed for purposes of this class. In the next section, having done that, you're going to refer to 3 different types of privilege or oppression that you experience, and at least one way in which each of these may impact your social work with clients. Anytime I refer to the way that something impacts something, I'm referring to actions that you will take. And becoming more understanding is not an action. That's something that goes on internally, but it's not a specific action. So you need to be concrete, very concrete, and give specific information as to the potential impact of the characteristic. You can see my example here. As a person of color, I'm more sensitive to the challenges faced by other people of color and can empathize with the oppression they face. Consequently, I will be a fierce advocate on behalf of issues facing people of color. If you're talking about a characteristic of privilege and how you might use that privilege in your social work practice, one of the things that you might say, for example, is that as a white person, you will use your white privilege to educate white peers and colleagues about the impact of white privilege on their relationships with their clients. And some of the assumptions that they make, you might say, for example, that you're going to educate them about the luxuriousness of being oblivious to having white privilege. So the key thing is that you need to specify an action as the impact. And you need to do this in 3 different types of privilege and oppression that you experience. After this, get into a little more simpler stuff, and you're going to identify 3 things that were particularly interesting, surprised you, or new information to you. and why each of these was surprising. So you're going to identify something that was interesting, and then the very next thing after that should be why it was interesting or surprised you, and do that for 3 different things. In the next section, you're going to identify 3 things you learned and how each of those may be applicable to your future social work practice. Okay. So again, in this section, what you need to do is identify, for example, thing number 1 that you learned, and then how that will be applicable to your social work practice. And then in the next paragraph, thing number 2 that you learned, and how that may be applicable to your social work practice. And then in the final paragraph in this section, thing number 3 that you learned, and how this can be applicable to your social work practice. The final thing, aside from the conclusion for this paper, is that you need to identify 2 questions or things that you still need to learn about the issue that you've read about, which in this case is privilege. So for example, a question that you might have following following your readings on privilege would be that you would like to learn more about how people of color experience the oppression that they experience, or the impact of intersectionality on people with different types of privilege and oppression. I would encourage you for each of these to use section headers. And if you do so, I would encourage you to use level 1 section headings, and you can read more about that in the information on APA style, both in the library's resources and in the resources in my mini guide. You will see here that I do take off for APA style, take off for a variety of things, and this other issues basically is the area in which I can take off for anything that I feel that you've done that is not accurate with APA style and which I've not stated here. Also note, obviously, this is an online class, so you're submitting your papers online, so you don't have to worry about it being stapled, but that's been a problem with face-to-face classes as they've turned in papers that were loose. You can also see here some of the things I'm looking for when it comes to grammar and writing style. A lot of you all are going to be wondering what a colloquial expression is, and basically that means do not write your paper in the same way that you talk to your friends. There's a lot of slang, a lot of informal language, and it's important to note that writing should be formal. It is by definition formal when you submit a paper for this class to me. A lot of students also have trouble with tense issues and grammar, and I'll be taking off for that. People also get the words who and that confused, so be sure that you are familiar with the distinction between those 2. Feel free to ask me any questions that you have about the paper. Feel free to email them. I am going to go ahead and create a discussion board for questions specifically related to this paper, in which you can post anonymous questions, as I really want to make sure, particularly since this is the first paper, that we've got all our bases covered. If you have any questions, though, please post on there, and certainly feel free to email me, message me, do whatever it takes to reach me to answer the questions that you have. I'm looking forward to reading your papers on this and to having a great semester.